Howdy, and welcome to part 2 of the Geology game plan. This is the Brightspace portion of it. If you've taken me for a prior class and you're like, I already know the game plan, you need to rethink that because I've done a structural change to Brightspace to try to help improve student success. If you're new to geology, to me, then you absolutely need to stay tuned for the Brightspace game plan, even if you are a pro at it. There's some things we can all learn about Brightspace that will help you perform better in any of your courses. So some courses use an external resource like My Math Lab, My Econ Lab. This course does not. Everything's embedded in the course shell. So when you log on, you'll have a course. Your pictures may not look like the ones I have here unless it's physical. That's my standard Antelope Canyon. And I want to talk about the navigation bar because it doesn't matter what course you're in. This is going to apply across the board. The default location when you enter a class is in the announcements, and MCC has put in a handful of student resource announcements like the free bus passes, resources, student counseling center, a feature about learning how to use alternative formats for folks with certain types of disabilities. So if you're in that situation, it's super helpful, awesome stuff. Now, you're going to spend 99% of your course time in here in geology under content. We'll come back to that. I don't have a required discussion unless I change a lab to be that format for some reason, or just an open discussion for extra credit. So stay tuned to that. The assessments I do want to talk about for a minute because there's only 2 times you need to access this part of the navigation bar, and that's for attendance and grades. Let me demonstrate why. Right now, you can see there's some stuff from last semester, it doesn't matter when you're watching this, that I haven't changed the due date for. Maybe I'm not going to have it this semester. And this could happen in any of your classes. And you're like, well, I don't know if I need to do this or not. If you're accessing your assignments this way, it's a crapshoot. Basically, it's like going to Vegas and gambling because you're not sure if that's what you really need to do. The same is true with quizzes. Students who access the quizzes, I can always tell if they access it from this point, especially if they run into barriers, because they may not need to take it or they're taking the wrong version. I've taken great care in trying to remove the extraneous quizzes, but in my older course shells, I may have stuff that students don't need to take. I also want to point out this thing right here, this icon. That is indication of let me put my mouse over it here. It is release or adapted release features. What that means is, let me show you. In your course overview folder, the one that you have to take before you access a single thing in week 1, you have to be able to complete these adaptive resource things. So I also put some on the week 1 lecture quiz, which required you to do this. Let me show you what the conditions are. I'm going to be very transparent about this. I'll go back and show you the getting started with coursework adaptive release. But this one I'm showing you for week 1 is kind of what I'm going to do for all quizzes in lecture. I'm going to ask that you read the week down in each week, and if it's in the summer, during the day. And then I'm going to have you watch the lecture video. I had somebody tell me last semester, Dr. Wagner, I don't need to watch your lecture videos. And I was like, okay, that's your choice. But when push came to shove, they were struggling for a grade that they needed to pass the class. And I can guarantee you not watching the lecture videos contributed to that. Then the other one is they had 2 sections to watch. So here's lecture video number 1, here's lecture video number 2. So if you don't complete those 3 things, you're not going to access the quiz. So let's go back and take a look at the example of where you might not find a quiz. I added this yesterday or this morning, getting started with coursework assessment. I'll show you where it is in a minute. Same thing, it has 5 releases. In other words, you have to complete these 5 things to take the quiz. You have to complete the Welcome to Physical Geology, and if you're in Earth Science, it'll say Welcome to Earth Science. If you're in Historical Geology, it will say Welcome to Historical Geology, and there's things that you need to read, links you need to click on. Then the next one is you watch the course Life Happens video. You should have already watched that. If you haven't, you have to go do that and watch it. And then the second one is you'll have to watch this video that you're watching right now, and then you'll have to click on the when are your assignments due, very specific so it's clear to you, and anything about your course materials for physical geology, because all physical geology students have a book and online students also have a rock kit. If you're in earth science, you have online reading at this time and no course materials. And if you're in historical geology, you have a digital book. So if you have a digital book, you should have received an email from the MCC bookstore a week before classes started. Go check it out because it's there. And it tells you how to activate that book. You also got an email if you have materials to pick up at the bookstore or have shipped to you like physical geology does. And you need to have that done by the end of week 1. Okay, so let's go back to, again, looking at the assessments. Remember, you don't want to be accessing assignments and quizzes in this class from here. Instead, do attendance and grades. Grades you should be looking at each and every week to make sure you're getting a grade. Give me the time frame that I have in the instructor plan to get the grades done. If I'm delayed, I put an announcement out there. I have a pet peeve about not returning grades to students when I've asked them to meet a deadline. It feels like I should be doing the same and modeling that behavior. So I'm very good about that. In addition, one of the tools for success is reading the feedback I give you. So I've had students go, I didn't know you had feedback. I just didn't think you were paying attention. I take great care in providing feedback each and every week on your lecture and lab assignments. It is in the grade book right next to your grade. There's a place to open up your feedback. So please read it. They can be very, very helpful. And there's sometimes action items that you may need to do to improve your grade. So that's on you to do. All right, on the class list, I want to show you something important. Right now, I'm the only student, so I feel like this is a good thing to do. I had a student last semester, first time in, I guess, that I knew of, where a student was copying my email out of Brightspace from an email I sent from Brightspace. In other words, they were replying to an announcement, and the email reads efagner@mccbrightspace.edu, not efagner@mclennan.edu. And my email, as listed in the instructor plan, is efagner@mclennan.edu. And the student was somewhat annoyed that they had not heard from me. And once I got all their correspondence, it was clear what happened. So you're free to use Brightspace because it's very safe to send emails. But when you do any kind of correspondence you're sending to your instructors, send it from your school email and then always include your email with it and enough detail to be able to get you the answer as fast as possible. So I've received so many emails over the years and text messages that I could write a book about, I don't understand this. That's all you get. Well, I can't help you very well with that. It may take 10 or 15 emails and calls and texts to get down to the bottom of what's really happening. I can't get this to work. The Lecture 1 quiz is not opening for me. I have downloaded the software for Respondus, and I can use it in another class with a screenshot of using it. That is more specific. So I need as much information as you can. Then be sure to send it. And when you do, make sure you include your course name, your name, and what the problem is. Okay, so that's one important element. Do not use the instant message. Stray away from that. That is a non-dependable way to reach your instructors. We don't get notified. We have to physically see it. That's very challenging. All right, if you need help, there's a lot of stuff under the help area. If you've not worked with Brightspace or need some support or want some help from the company. Now, let's get back to content because that's where you're going to spend so much of your time. So, notice the table of contents. Let me just go right here. When I hit the table of contents, if you get kind of overwhelmed with all your folders expanding, just hit the table of contents and it will flatten them back out again. In other words, make everything compressed. There are 236 items in there. That doesn't mean you have 236 whopping things to do. That's overwhelming, right? Instead, it means there are 236 total items in the table of contents, from everything from a web link to an announcement to a website to an assessment to an assignment. So it's all of those things combined. So I want you to see the basic structure because it's going to be this way regardless of what course you have. And if you've taken me with a prior course, this is the fundamental new game plan change. You're not going to be able to move into the key folder you'll spend most of your time in, which is weekly lecture and lab assignments, until you've completed everything in here. I've set release adaptive requirements, making you have to watch these videos, the two, download the instructor plan, read about your course materials if applicable, read about how to contact me, how to drop the class, and in this Getting Started with Coursework folder, let me point out that there is a little quiz or assessment that you need to take that's 10 questions long. And do you see that it has adaptive conditions? And it tells you what those conditions are before you can actually move on. In other words, you can't take this assessment. And if you don't take the assessment, you can't move into the most important part of the course, which is weekly lectures and lab assignments. Assuming you have, this is what you're going to see. Right now, I have this set up for a spring class, but it works the same for summer. It'd be every day instead of week. And in the fall, it would have fall dates. But you'll notice that if it's week 1, this is January the 9th through the 14th. And if it's in the fall, it would be like August, something to something. And if it's summer, it's going to be the day of either summer 1 or summer 2 session. So it's very clear. And when you get there, you have a rundown and you have a checklist. So what I've discovered is some people respond better to detail, some respond better to more abbreviated items. That's why you have 2 items to go through. And notice you have a folder for lecture assignments and then a folder for lab assignments. Let me be clear, if you're in my blended class, your due dates are different than what you're seeing here. Your due dates are very specified to your class. You have a separate video that you'll watch for that. But you'll have a folder for lecture, your lecture quiz is in there. You have your lab assignments folder. Every one of my classes is set up the same way. So let's go look at the rundown. The first one's always very much information. You're like, lots of information. Well, I try to give you as much detail as possible because what I found is online courses, blended courses, even face-to-face courses where the instructor assumes you're going to understand what they mean, that's a leap of faith. And oftentimes in communication, we need to express what we're really wanting in detail for people to perceive the same things we're wanting them to perceive. So this is the more detailed. You'll notice that your lecture quiz is due on Thursday by 11:55 p.m. And it is clear that you won't be able to access any of this until you've completed the Getting Started with Coursework. And then with this lecture quiz, you won't be able to do it until you've read the rundown and watched the lecture videos in that specific week's folder. So that's a game change, like a game plan change from those of you in my prior semesters. That means you're going to actually have to do these things and watch the lectures, not that you weren't. But after having some students tell me that they didn't need to watch the lecture videos, I was like, well, we're not meeting contact hours that way. And I went and checked, and sure enough, they were right. They didn't watch the lecture videos. And as I started looking through student after student after student who wasn't performing well, there was a trend. And so you can make that happen. Then notice that number 5 says you have lab experiences. So in geology, physical geology that is, there's some weeks where you have 2 labs and you're like, oh, that's a lot of work. Well, it's really not. It's like having 1 lab combined. So in physical geology, and the same is true in earth science and historical geology, if you have a lab assessment that's required for an assignment, I'm not asking you to turn in a lab form. But if I don't have a lab assessment, I'm asking you to turn in the lab form. And if you're in a blended class or face-to-face, I may have also certain labs that you're doing in class with me that you're turning in a lab form in person and not online. So it's very clear in the instructor plan, and I've made it so in Brightspace as well for your class. So I do want to point out in the week 1 lecture, notice that there's a copy of the first 4 chapters of the book. You're going to need to have that starting in week 2 for physical. Again, earth science, you don't have a book right now. And historical, you need yours on day 1. So in the lab experiences, let's come to that. Do the same thing. It tells you when they're due. All labs are due on Saturday or before. And then you can get in, if you get lost, just click on the lab assignments again for that week, and then you can see the individual folders. So lab 1 is you in physical geology. It's a super easy lab. It has 14 questions. There's some either in your textbook if you're in physical, or a handout I give you online in our science and historical, and then 4 additional questions and an action item and an assignment tool. So where do you find that assignment tool? Right beneath the instructions. And then in the second lab for physical, you have a virtual field trip and then an assessment. So you'd use your completed lab form to take the assessment. Notice there is an end date. The end date is when that closes and you can no longer take the assessment. So here is a word of advice. If you are waiting to do these things and you're allowing yourself 15 or 20 minutes to take an assessment, whether it's a quiz, a test, or a lab, I'm going to tell you, your submission probably won't take, because you'll exceed the time limit. So on your lecture quizzes, you have 30 minutes unless you have accommodations for extended time. I've added those in, but you must have them through the MCC accommodations office. For labs, I have a recommended time frame, and when that assignment's due, it closes. If you're in an exam and you exceed the clock, you're stuck. It won't submit. Non-submitted assignments, according to the instructor plan, are not accepted for a grade. So you need to be reaching out ASAP, because that's a problem. And it's a problem when you haven't managed your time. Of course, extenuating circumstances occur sometimes, but most of the time it's because someone waited to the last minute. So each week's going to be set up the same. Let's look at week 2. And you're going to see there's the rundown, the checklist. Here's your lecture assignment. Here is your lab assignment. Pretty straightforward. Week 3, same drill. Rundown, checklist, lecture, then lab. Oh, this was not showing, so just expand it. There it is, and there's everything you need to know. If you're in online physical, you're going to have a rock kit, and you'll start using it in week 2. So that's one reason you've got to be contacting the bookstore ASAP. You'll notice that I've closed weeks 9 through the end of the semester. They'll open up about a month in, because I don't want to overwhelm students, and it's happened in the past. But if you get to that point and you've already worked ahead, just reach out to me and I can give you access. So I will make things available early so you can get things done well in advance. And that's a piece of advice I have to you, is to get things in advance. So let's go hit the table of contents again to kind of shrink everything. Notice that the exams folder is next. In the exams folder, it clearly tells you when your exams are. You have 2 in any class that you're taking with me. And these are your high stakes exams. They're due at noon. So that's a game plan change. So if you've been in a prior class, that time frame has changed. You need to make note that it's noon. That's 12 p.m. lunchtime, noon. So you can't use any outside resources. You can't have earbuds unless you have an ADA accommodations and it's on your list for these types of things. And I might add, you're going to need the lockdown browser, not just for exams, but also for your weekly lecture quizzes. So that should be established before your first lecture quiz, and you'll be using the monitor for your exams. That means you need a webcam. If you have a work device or a dual credit device, your IT folks may need to give special permissions to download the software. So if you're waiting till the day of the exam, you may miss it. So that's why you have a technology check due about week 3. And if you miss that and you have a disaster because you haven't done it, that responsibility is on your shoulders, fair and square. So make sure you've taken care of those items. Contact me immediately after week 3 if you're starting, or day 3 in summer if you're starting to see an issue with that. This technology check is a single 1-question experience that shows you exactly what it's like to take an exam using Respondus Monitor, so there's no stress with that experience on the day of. Troubleshooting is important because sometimes our computer gets full of cookies and cache, and we need to clear them in the browser we're using. So make sure you've done that and follow all of the instructions if you're having trouble. Your study guides are in the exam study guides. So if you're taking a midterm or a lab exam, it will have that, by the way, in physical. You don't have a midterm, you have a lab exam. There's a picture study guide, very, very helpful. And everyone has a final exam study guide, very, very helpful. And their videos are there as well that you may have for the semester. Then your portals, meaning the actual exam itself, is in the exams folder. And you might go, why didn't you put it in the weekly folder? Because it gets lost. All exam stuff needs to stay together. And so it tells you what the rules are, when the test starts and when it ends. You'll be able to access these exams a week before they're due. So when someone says, well, I didn't have enough time, I'm going to go, you had 7 days, and it was disclosed to you from day one. Most people have no issues getting their exams done, and I'm going to encourage you not to wait till exam day to get it done. There's lots of users on the system, lots of potential failure points and added stress you don't need. Get geology out of the way and you'll be in great shape. There's still another folder. Let's kind of flatten everything there and get to the Baby Yoda folder. This is the MONUS folder. A good reason to activate your Brightspace notification and email notification, which is required by the instructor plan, is here. Because if I add a surprise, a little Easter egg, you're going to be able to find it and be notified. So be checking the Baby Yoda folder. This can only help your grade, cannot hurt it. If you would like to know more about student resources, this is something added by MCC. It's a great resource page that can be super helpful. There's that as well. The point being is you're going to spend your time in the table of contents in Brightspace. Each week, you're going to be spending most of your time in the second folder. Each week has a lecture and a lab folder, and there are multiple pieces in each folder. So that's a big change from the way my structure was laid out in the past, where I had lab in one folder and lecture in another. Everything's combined by week or day in the semester. In other words, you can find everything you need each and every day or week in the respective folder you're in. So if you have questions, reach out to me. Brightspace is a learning management system. I will tell you, if you find a due date that's different in Brightspace versus the instructor plan, the instructor plan prevails. I sometimes miss one. It's always a good idea to email me if you have a question, because you need to be following the instructor plan. That's the contract between you and every course instructor, is that instructor plan. It is a legal document, in fact. So that's what we'll go by. I've tried to work hard to make you a super organized, predictable course Brightspace shell with predictable due dates and times. And it's your responsibility to get them entered into something like your phone. There's one more thing I want to address, and that is scanning lab forms. So I'm going to look at my phone right quick, and I'm going to bring up the notes. So in the notes function, I can have a little place that I can click, and it's different on different phones, but you do. And I'm going to hit the camera button, which was right here, and you're going to notice it asks me if I can scan documents. I can scan 10, 15 pages with this and save it as one PDF. Save yourself a lot of heartache and time by using a scanning app like the one that's on most smartphones. And you can revolutionize saving documents, even important documents you might use in your private life. So there are lots of things you're going to need that for this semester. And I'm going to tell you that PDF is the way to do any of your documents. If you're sending Google Docs and forgetting to convert them into Word, that's on you, or specifically a PDF. PDF is portable document format, and it can be opened by any program. So it is the only right choice, I think, for sending in documents. Think about that as you're dealing with instructors about the challenges we face on opening documents in formats that Brightspace just will not open. Google Docs is one of them, like .heic, lots of different formats it just will not work with. So make sure that you're sending the right uploaded form documents to Brightspace. Your ticket to success is following the game plan. Now you know what's expected of you in terms of the life happens part. Now you know what's expected of you in Brightspace and where to find things. So you're in a great place to have a superior game performance in geology. Thanks for your time. Bye.